The time is 6:03 a.m. The Strait of Hormuz, 11 nautical miles south-southwest of Qeshm Island, in the eastbound traffic lane, at the point where the navigable channel narrows to its most commercially consequential geometry. The water here is 34 meters deep, which sounds like enough until you remember that the keel of a laden VLCC sits approximately 22 meters below the waterline, leaving approximately 12 meters between the bottom of the world's largest commercial vessels and the seabed. A clearance that sounds generous until something is placed in the water column between those 2 points with the specific intention of reducing it to zero. The USS McFaul, DDG-74, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, is running east at 16 knots in the traffic lane, positioned as advance escort for a formation of 3 commercial tankers scheduled to transit the strait on a staggered timing that puts the first vessel behind the McFaul by approximately 22 minutes. The McFaul's role this morning is route clearance confirmation, not the specialized mine countermeasures mission that dedicated MCM vessels conduct, but the general surface and subsurface awareness sweep that an escorting combatant provides as a first-pass assessment of the transit corridor before commercial traffic follows. The distinction matters. The McFaul is not an MCM ship. She does not carry sonar systems optimized for mine detection, does not carry mine-hunting ROVs, and does not have an EOD detachment embarked. She carries the sensors that an Arleigh Burke carries, a hull-mounted sonar designed primarily for submarine detection, surface search radar, and the SLQ-32 electronic warfare suite. For a first-pass route clearance assessment, these are sufficient to identify gross anomalies in the traffic lane. For a full mine countermeasures sweep, they are not the right tools. This morning, the gross anomaly finds the McFaul before the McFaul finds it. At 6:03 a.m., the McFaul's AN/SQS-53C hull-mounted sonar, running in its active mode, pinging the water column ahead of the ship's track with the systematic regularity of a system designed to find things in water, returned an anomalous bottom contact, bearing 269 degrees, range 847 meters, depth approximately 18 meters below the surface. The return was not a clean bottom reflection. It had the specific character, the return strength, the aspect, the Doppler signature of a nearly stationary object at mid-water column depth that sonar operators learn to distinguish from the ambient acoustic environment of a shallow water transit. The sonar operator had been at his console since 5:15 a.m. He had made that distinction correctly in approximately 2 seconds. Possible contact, bearing 269, 847 meters, depth 18 meters, the sonar operator reported, with the specific flatness that training produces in people who have learned to report what they observe rather than what they conclude. Bottom return anomalous. Recommend active track. The officer of the deck had the report within 4 seconds. The tactical action officer had it within 6. The commanding officer, who had been on the bridge since 5:45 a.m., had it within 10. "All stop," the commanding officer said. "Maintain active track. Do not approach that contact." The McFaul's engines went to all stop at 6:03 a.m. and 22 seconds. At 16 knots, her momentum carried her forward approximately 180 meters in the time it took the engineering plant to respond, and the hull to begin decelerating against the water's resistance. At 6:04 a.m. and 14 seconds, she had slowed to 4 knots. At 6:04 a.m. and 41 seconds, she was essentially stationary, 667 meters from the contact, 667 meters from something in the water column, at 18 meters depth that had produced an anomalous sonar return in the Strait of Hormuz eastbound traffic lane. The commanding officer was now managing a situation that required decisions across several simultaneous dimensions. The immediate tactical picture, the commercial traffic behind him that did not know what was ahead, and the resources he needed to characterize what the sonar had found. He made 3 transmissions in rapid sequence. First, to the commercial convoy's lead tanker on the escort frequency, __quote, _4, second, to 5th Fleet on the emergency circuit, __quote, _5, _third, to his executive officer, _quote, _6, the SH-6, OB's dipping sonar, the AN/AQS-22 airborne low-frequency sonar, is not a dedicated mine-hunting sensor. It is designed primarily for submarine detection, operating at frequencies and in modes optimized for acoustic contact with submerged submarines. It is, however, a sonar system that can be operated in modes useful for characterizing a contact at 18 meters depth in 34 meters of water, particularly when the alternative is sending a ship to within 847 meters of an uncharacterized object in the Strait of Hormuz. Here is the vulnerability window, and it arrived at 6:03 a.m. and has not left. The McFaul is stopped, or nearly stopped, in the Strait of Hormuz eastbound traffic lane. The traffic lane is approximately 9 nautical miles wide at this point, bounded by the traffic separation scheme's median line to the north and the Omani territorial sea boundary to the south. A stationary destroyer in a shipping lane is not a neutral event. Vessels behind the McFaul would be approaching the stopped vessel's position at their transit speeds. The 3 commercial tankers in the convoy had received the halt order and were complying. The other commercial traffic in the lane, vessels not in the convoy, vessels that had been behind and were now converging on the McFaul's position, required active management on Channel 16 to be diverted or held clear. The officer of the deck was managing traffic advisories on Channel 16. The tactical action officer was managing the tactical picture. The commanding officer was managing the EOD and MCM coordination. The sonar operator was maintaining continuous track on the contact. The McFaul was doing all of this while stopped in a narrow shipping lane with an uncharacterized object 667 meters ahead. The SLQ-32's collection from the previous 8 hours of the McFaul's transit had already been queried by the intelligence team, and what it had found was worth noting. At 2:17 a.m., 3 hours and 46 minutes before the sonar contact, the SLQ-32 had logged a brief emission, approximately 4 seconds, from a contact bearing 034 degrees at an assessed range of 6.2 nautical miles. The emission frequency was consistent with a narrow-band acoustic transducer operating in a command/control mode, the kind of emission associated with a remotely activated mine's acoustic sensitivity check or arming sequence. The emission had been logged at 2:17 a.m. It had been flagged by the SLQ-32's automated processing as a person of interest frequency with moderate confidence. It had not been escalated at 2:17 a.m. because moderate confidence flagging of a brief emission in the small hours watch in the Strait of Hormuz produces a large number of similar events across a deployment, and distinguishing the significant ones from the ambient is the specific challenge of maritime electronic intelligence in this operational environment. In retrospect, the 2:17 a.m. emission was almost certainly the mine's acoustic arming sequence being confirmed from a control position on or near Qeshm Island. In retrospect, at 2:17 a.m., it had been logged and not escalated. This was not a failure of watchkeeping. It was the operational reality of a system that produces more potential signals than any watch team can escalate in real time, and that requires the retrospective correlation that the intelligence team was now performing at 6:15 a.m. to identify what had been missed and why. The retrospective correlation was itself an intelligence product. The specific frequency, the emission duration, the bearing, and the timing relative to the sonar contact constituted a data point about IRGCN mine laying or mine arming operational signatures that the intelligence database did not have at this level of specificity. A probable acoustic arming sequence for a mine in the Hormuz traffic lane, logged 8 hours before the mine was detected, characterized with the precision of a 4-second emission from a bearing that placed the control position on or near Qeshm Island. This was collection that would be used to improve the detection and escalation criteria for similar emissions in future operations. The SH-60B launched from the McFaul's flight deck at 6:19 a.m. The dipping sonar was deployed at 6:28 a.m. at a position calculated to approach the contact from the south, away from the primary traffic lane and away from the McFaul's hull, and the first active dip began at 6:31 a.m. The dipping sonar contact from the helicopter's position 200 meters south-southeast of the original sonar detection bearing was clearer than the hull-mounted sonar's initial return. The target was at 18.4 meters depth, 3 meters off the bottom, with a spherical acoustic profile consistent with a moored mine, a contact shape that is not a submarine and is not a piece of seafloor geology and is not a large fish and is the specific shape that mine detection sonar returns from moored spherical mines of the kind that the IRGCN has maintained in inventory for several decades. The characterization was reported to the commanding officer at 6:38 a.m. Probable moored mine, spherical configuration, anchored at 18.4 meters depth in the traffic lane, position confirmed to within 15 meters. The commanding officer relayed the characterization to 5th Fleet at 6:39 a.m. and received acknowledgement that MCM assets were being repositioned from their current operating areas. The USS Pioneer, a Cyclone-class patrol craft with an embarked EOD mobile unit team, was 34 nautical miles to the west and was now making maximum speed toward the McFaul's position. Estimated time of arrival, 2 hours and 47 minutes. 2 hours and 47 minutes. The McFaul would be stationary, or near stationary, in the Strait of Hormuz traffic lane for approximately 2 hours and 47 minutes, managing traffic advisories, maintaining sonar track, and waiting for assets that were optimized for the next phase of the operation. She would also be collecting. The 2:17 a.m. emission had been from bearing 034 degrees at 6.2 nautical miles from the direction of Qeshm Island. The mine's position in the traffic lane was consistent with a deployment from a vessel operating from Qeshm Island's southern approaches. The SLQ-32 was now reviewing the complete 8-hour emission log for any additional contacts from that bearing sector that might characterize the mine-laying operation's electronic signature. At 7:02 a.m., the intelligence team found a second emission of interest. At 11:48 p.m. the previous night, 6.5 hours before the sonar contact, 10 hours before the McFaul's transit began, the SLQ-32 had logged a 22-second emission on a frequency consistent with a marine acoustic release mechanism of the type used to anchor moored mines at specific depths. The bearing was 021 degrees, consistent with the Qeshm Island southern approach. The emission had lasted long enough to characterize completely frequency, modulation, pulse pattern. The 22-second emission at 11:48 p.m. was the mine-laying event. A marine acoustic release mechanism is used to set the mine's depth anchor, the mechanism that positions the mine at its target depth after it has been released from the laying vessel. The 22-second emission was the mechanism's deployment confirmation signal. The mine had been placed in the traffic lane at approximately 11:48 p.m. the previous night. The acoustic arming confirmation had occurred at 2:17 a.m. The McFaul had detected the mine at 6:03 a.m. The timeline was now complete, and the complete timeline was an intelligence product of considerable value. The specific frequencies of both the acoustic release mechanism and the arming sequence, the deployment timing pattern, the position of the control facility on Qeshm Island from the bearing data, and the interval between mine emplacement and arming confirmation, 6.5 hours, which provided a behavioral characteristic of IRGCN, mine-laying operational security protocols. 6.5 hours between deployment and arming was a data point about how the IRGCN manages the window between laying a mine and activating it. Whether that interval reflects caution, waiting until the laying vessel is safely clear and the arming team is at their control position, or operational protocol, a fixed timing window that could be exploited in future operations, was a question that the analysts would work through in the hours and days following the incident. The McFaul's SH-60B maintained continuous acoustic track on the mine for the 2 hours and 31 minutes until the Pioneer arrived at 9:30 a.m. The dipping sonar had been operating in 15-minute cycles: dip, collect, recover, reposition, dip again, maintaining the contact with the patience of a crew that understood the importance of not losing track of a confirmed mine while MCM assets were en route. The Pioneer's EOD team assessed the mine at 10:17 a.m. following their own sonar characterization, which confirmed the McFaul's findings and added a magnetic signature measurement that provided additional classification detail. The mine was assessed as an Iranian-manufactured variant of the Soviet Krab moored mine, a spherical contact mine with a magnetic fuse, consistent with the IRGCN's documented mine inventory, and of a type that the EOD team's threat library contained specific neutralization procedures for. The neutralization was conducted at 11:44 a.m. The mine was rendered safe by the Pioneer's EOD dive team using procedures that will not be described here because EOD neutralization procedures are exactly the kind of technical information that does not benefit from public documentation. At 11:51 a.m., the McFaul transmitted on the convoy frequency __, quote _7, __. The 3 commercial tankers, which had been holding position for 5 hours and 48 minutes, began their eastbound transit at 11:54 a.m. Their delay was significant, 5 hours and 48 minutes of straight transit time across 3 tankers carrying combined cargo of approximately 6.1 million barrels of crude. The economic disruption of that delay, measured in market timing and charter penalties, was calculable and was not small. The IRGCN mine had achieved part of its intended effect. It had disrupted commercial transit through the Strait of Hormuz for the better part of a morning. The disruption was temporary. The mine was gone. The traffic was moving again by noon. What the mine had also achieved, inadvertently, was the most comprehensive electronic characterization of IRGCN mine-laying operational procedures that the Fifth Fleet Intelligence Database had received in the current deployment cycle. The acoustic release mechanism frequency from 11:48 p.m., the arming confirmation frequency from 2:17 a.m., the bearing data placing the control facility on Qeshm Island's southern approach, the deployment to arming interval of 6.5 hours, the mine type characterization from the magnetic signature, the deployment position in the traffic lane relative to the Qeshm Island southern approach bearing. Each of these was a data point. Combined, they characterized an IRGCN mine-laying operation from emplacement to detection with a completeness that had not been achieved in previous collection on IRGCN mine activity in the Strait. The SLQ-32's continuous 8-hour log had contained the relevant emissions the entire time. They had been logged, they had been processed, the significant ones had not been escalated in real time, and the retrospective correlation had recovered them completely. The retrospective recovery was itself a lesson in collection architecture. The emissions had been there, the processing had characterized them. The escalation criteria had not flagged them at the level of priority that would have put them in front of a decision-maker at 2:17 a.m. The retrospective correlation had connected them to the subsequent sonar contact and produced the complete timeline. The lesson for future operations. The Strait's acoustic emission environment contains IRGCN mine-laying signatures that can be characterized with the existing SLQ-32 architecture and the escalation criteria for narrow-band acoustic emissions at specific frequencies from the direction of Qeshm Island should be reviewed in light of this engagement's data. The recommendation was in the intelligence annex of the after-action report, which was completed at 3:30 p.m. and distributed to the Fifth Fleet Intelligence Staff, the Naval EOD community, and the Mine Warfare Center in Panama City, Florida, which maintains the professional knowledge base for U.S. naval mine countermeasures operations globally and whose interest in real-world IRGCN mine deployment electronic signatures was standing and comprehensive. The 3 tankers cleared the eastern exit of the Strait of Hormuz at 2:47 p.m., running approximately 5 hours and 45 minutes behind their original schedule. Their masters filed incident reports with their flag states and their companies. The shipping industry's maritime security coordination channels received an advisory at 12:30 p.m. describing the mine detection, neutralization, and the specific strait sector that had been affected. 47 shipping companies that had vessels scheduled for strait transit in the following 72 hours received the advisory. 17 of them requested updated route guidance. 3 of them requested U.S. Navy escort coordination for their scheduled transits. The market for maritime insurance in the Strait of Hormuz adjusted. as it always adjusts when a mine is confirmed in the shipping lane, in ways that are measurable and that affect the economics of global oil supply chains in direct proportion to the duration and severity of the disruption. The IRGCN mine had been in the water for approximately 6 hours and 15 minutes before it was detected. It had caused 5 hours and 48 minutes of commercial traffic delay. It had been neutralized without incident or harm to any vessel or crew. It had generated a collection product that updated the IRGCN mine-laying operational signature database in ways that would improve future detection and escalation performance. Iranian state media covered the incident at 4 p.m., describing a successful deterrence operation that had demonstrated Iran's ability to protect its strategic maritime interests in the Persian Gulf. The coverage made no reference to a mine. It made reference to IRGCN maritime forces having conducted patrols in the Strait of Hormuz. The connection between those patrols and the 5 hours and 48 minutes of commercial traffic disruption that morning was left as an exercise for the reader. The McFaul resumed her patrol at 12:10 p.m., following route clearance confirmation of the continued transit corridor. She had been stationary or near stationary in the Strait of Hormuz for 5 hours and 56 minutes. The sonar operator who had detected the mine filed his contact report at 6:45 a.m., 42 minutes after the initial detection, after the SH-60B confirmation, in the careful technical language of a professional who had done his job correctly in the 2 seconds between the anomalous return and the verbal report. He did not consider this remarkable. It was what the training was for. The training had worked. The mine was gone. The traffic was moving. The data was in the database. The Strait of Hormuz absorbs everything and gives nothing away voluntarily. The McFaul had asked it a question with active sonar at 6:03 a.m. The answer had been 847 meters ahead, 18 meters down, moored to the seabed with an acoustic release mechanism that had been emitting at 11:48 p.m. the previous night, and that the SLQ-32 had been logging the whole time. The database is a little more complete than it was yesterday. The strait is a little more legible than it was yesterday. Tomorrow, it will be more legible still. Bye for now.